Actually, I think we will go ahead and get started. Um, and hopefully everybody's seeing the page that I'm sharing right now. The newsletter for this past month, or the last couple of months actually, just went out. Um, you should have it in your email. Um, and I wanted to talk just a little bit about that before we get into our main presentation for the day. So we've just changed the way that we're handling both the newsletter and the calendar invitations for this call, the advisory call. And we're using a listserv for it now. So you'll be able to manage your own subscriptions to the newsletter and this advisory call calendar invitations um, through this listserv. So there are a couple of ways you can get to it. You can get to it from this link here in the newsletter that just went out today. And it'll take you to this page. If you got the invitation for this calendar, the calendar invitation for this, let's see, I'm getting a bunch of background noise, so I'm going to mute all. And that way we'll hopefully not get the background noise. Anyway, so if you want to add yourself to the newsletter list, you can do that here on this page. Just put in your email address and your name here. If you want to unsubscribe, you can do that here as well. You can just put your email in here and hit the unsubscribe button, and you'll be unsubscribed from the list. We used to maintain the list for the advisory call and for the newsletter separately, but with this changing over to this listserv, it's only going to be one list. So you'll just get the calendar invitations and the newsletter once a month each on this listserv. I would suggest that you not use the digest option. So there's really no need for you to know. We added everybody to the list, everybody that was on our list already. We've added everyone to this listserv. It assigned you a random password. You can request that password through this form, but there's really no need for you to have that password. The only thing you really need to be able to do is unsubscribe if you want to stop getting the emails and the calendar invites. I'd suggest not using, there is a digest option that will pause and not send you the email right away. It'll only send it once a day or once a week, depending on how you set that. But we don't send a lot of emails to this list. It's going to be really just a couple a month. An email for and once a month for the advisory call, the calendar invitations. And we want you to be able to get those calendar invitations updated. For example, if we need to send out an update right away on the day of the call, we wouldn't want you to miss that because you had set it to digest mode. So that's that. The newsletter is out. And it's a new format with this new look and feel. There's an article here that you can read about more about that, and it'll also describe how to do the subscriptions. There's this page which you can link to here, which I've already opened here, which is the newsletter page. This will always be where you can go to get the most current newsletter. You can also see the archived previous versions of the newsletter. We've got the archive going all the way back, I think, to 2001. So we have almost 20 years here of the newsletters from the NHD program. And I wanted to mention the subscribe button here with the email with a little envelope on it you can subscribe, and that'll take you back to that page that I just showed you. And that's just managing that listserv. You can also subscribe with RSS, but we don't recommend that you do that because that won't put you on our mailing list. And you won't get the calendar invitations for the advisory call or anything if you do that. If you know what RSS is all about, that presumably works, but no guarantees. None of us really use that, so know how to manage RSS. So it's there, but you're on your own there. Also, just mentioned here, you can see, you can get all our emails and connection information. The general email for support is nhd@usgs.gov, or if you can reach out to one of us individually if you want to. And so that's all that I wanted to cover about this to begin with. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And yes.
Hi, there's a question in the chat kind of relevant to this topic. I don't know if you want to address that now or later.
Okay, sure.
But it's from Danielle, and it says for those
yes, about the password.
Yeah.
Right. So yes, when we added everyone to the list from our old list, which was in a spreadsheet, the software assigned everybody a password. We don't know what the password is. If you want to find out, you can go into that listserv, and on that page you can find out. But there really isn't much need for you to do that, because the only thing the password would let you do would be to set options to digest mode, which is not really recommending that you do that. But if you go in here, put your email in here, one of the options you get is to have it send you your password. It will send the password in free text in an email, so it's not secure. So we don't really recommend that you do that, but that will be the way it works. It's a pretty simple thing. Okay, and with that, Hayley Thompson is going to give our presentation today. Hayley, you can go ahead and share your screen. Hayley's going to talk about the trace network in ArcGIS Pro. We had a presentation about from Esri a few months ago. It was sort of still in beta at that time. And Hayley's going to give you sort of just a very easy introduction to the trace network in ArcGIS Pro, how that works, and how you can use it with NHD data. So Hayley, you might have to unmute yourself, but you can go ahead.
All right, can you hear me and see my screen?
Yes.
All right. Well, hi everybody. As Al mentioned, my name is Hayley Thompson. I am a hydrography researcher in the Topographic Applied Research Section at the National Geospatial Technical Operations Center. And that is quite a mouthful. But today, as Al mentioned also, I'm going to be giving you a look today at how to utilize trace network, build and perform a simple trace using one of our NHD data sets. Just a quick outline of the main topics I'm going to go over today. First, I'm going to give you a definition of what is trace network. We're going to go over how to create and enable a trace network and then perform a simple trace, as well as any additional information and resources. And finally, I believe we should have time at the end for any questions anyone might have. So, quick disclaimer here, the USGS product names disclaimer down here at the bottom. Any use of trade, firm, or product names is for descriptive purposes only and does not imply endorsement by the US government. And before we get too far into how to build and enable and then run the trace network, I I want to give you the simple definition here. So trace network is a toolbox that was released in the ArcGIS Pro version 2.6 that is used to return selected features based on connectivity or traversability from specified starting points in a network. So overall, this toolbox is supposed to allow users to analyze paths within a network. This is an example of a trace here. So this process of creating, enabling, and tracing, it can be fairly easy. And there are two main avenues a user can go about when choosing to create a trace network. So you can do this by converting a geometric network to a trace network, or by creating a trace network from scratch. This is especially useful as a lot of our products currently for the NHD and NHD plus high resolution are still being distributed with geometric networks. So it's very easy in ArcGIS Pro especially to just be able to convert that and use it as a trace network without having to delete and recreate. However, both of these methods do exist within ArcGIS Pro 2.6 and will continue to exist onward for this foreseeable future as far as we're aware. So regardless of which avenue you choose to create a trace network from, you then have to enable network topology before being able to trace. And I'll show you kind of why that's important in a later slide. And then the last step is to trace the network. And again, I will also be showing you how to do that in a later slide. So these are just the essentials in creating a trace network. You will see that there are other tools available here. We're not really going to be covering them in this demonstration. However, if you want to create a more complex network, you can do so by adding in details such as network attributes and setting flow direction. After creating a trace network, what do you get? So this slide here demonstrates the network utilities as feature classes in your map that are a result of creating a trace network. And these layers are very informative in a lot of ways. So you get a point error layer, which manages any errors within any point feature class that you include in your trace network. I do not have any point feature classes included in my network I'm going to be using in this demonstration. However, I did want to point out that this can be a useful tool, and this will appear in your map if you choose to use so and have any errors. We also have the line error layer, which manages any errors within any line feature class in a network. System junctions, which show all points where two or more vertices meet between two different segments of a network. So any flow line that touches another flow line, you will get one of these system junctions. And finally, you also have dirty areas, which when you enable the network, dirty areas are generated for features where the geometry edits have been made after creating a trace network, or where errors exist in either your point or line error feature classes. So this is the first stage after you would run either creating a trace network from scratch or converting a trace network. This will be what appears in your map. And this is a reminder that you have not yet enabled network topology on your trace network. So at this stage, the dirty area, that purple box, specific to the errors as it is intended to kind of be, but is instead at the full extent of the map. And this is also the stage where after you create a trace network, if you wanted a more complex network, you could add in network attributes, or if you have any geometry errors that need to be addressed, or you would like to modify the geometry of your network in any way, you would do that before you enable the topology of your network. So after enabling a network and creating it, you get this kind of layout here. This is what you'll see. It'll zoom in to your VPU or your NHD data set, and you will also start to see if you have any line errors or point error features, as well as these smaller dirty areas, such as right here, which surround any errors that you might have. So what I'm showing in this subset of this whole network here is one of the line errors and dirty area combinations that I have as a result of creating and enabling my network. This error is an example of one of the side effects. It's kind of a byproduct of using trace network with our NHD or NHD plus high resolution products. And in your attribute table, which if we have time at the end, I can show you in greater detail what this looks like in a pro session. Mine was acting up a little bit this morning, so I wanted to make sure I could show you this, so I included it here. And this is what's going to be called a duplicate vertex error. It is the most common one you'll see in trace network with the NHD or NHD plus high resolution products. It is not really a true error on the part of either the trace network or the NHD or NHD plus high resolution products. It relates to the database tolerances that Esri has and the database tolerances that we use when creating our data. So if you were to zoom in, and I can show you this at the end as well, it would appear as if there was a duplicate vertice right on this endpoint right here. It is not. They are just too close together, these vertexes, for the trace network tool to accurately distinguish them from each other. There is a way to, instead of having to go in and edit each of these, to trace around them, and that's what I'm going to be showing you today. So before I show you that, I would like to show you how to set up a simple trace. So before we use the trace tool within the trace network toolbox, we do have to add a starting point to the map, or starting points, depending on which kind of trace you would like to use, which can be accessed on a trace network toolbar up at the top here. This toolbar is automatically added to an ArcGIS Pro session and can be accessed when you have an active trace network in your map. So you don't have to worry about adding this in as a separate step. If you have a trace network in your drawing order of your map, this toolbox will automatically be available. So the first thing you do is there is this option here for trace locations up here at the top. You'd select that, and this window here pops up. And from there, you choose the Add Features option and select somewhere on the map. So the user can add as many starting points on a map as you would like to trace at any location on a line segment. It's not particularly picky where you put these starting points. Just note that even if you place it in the middle of a line segment, or like I did here, I didn't put it directly on the junction, it will still trace that entire flow line in your trace once you get to that step. I also do want to note here that also in trace locations, there is an option to use barriers. I'm not going to be using any barriers in this trace, but this is a good example of how you might want to create an even more complex network, such as if a dam existed and you didn't want to trace. Let's say you were starting up here upstream, but the dam existed right here and you didn't want to include that section. You could place a barrier and then trace. This section would be excluded. It would recognize that barrier. So the last step before tracing is using the trace tool itself. So once you've established those starting points, you're going to go and open the trace tool from the trace network toolbox. And then you would go, this is the geoprocessing window that you would see over here on the right. And you're going to verify or add in inputs here. So all of these are default. It automatically recognizes if you have a trace network in your window. If you do have multiple, you do want to verify that it has selected the correct one. There are 4 types of traces you can perform. For the purposes of this, I'm going to use downstream, but you can also use upstream, connected, or shortest path. As I said, we're going to use downstream for this trace. For starting points, this is a default. You set this up in the previous step. It's a temporary file that is automatically placed into the tool based on which starting points you choose from the map. And additionally, it does the same thing for barriers. If you've placed any barriers, it automatically has this temporary file and will to the tool for you. There are some advanced options. I'll show you them a little bit later on. We're not going to go in how to trace with them necessarily, but I will show you kind of what some options are if you do want to create a more complex network. And then the last step down here at the bottom, you would just run the tool. So with that error feature in mind, in that data set that I showed you earlier, this is the first thing that you would get. So if there are any errors as part of the trace, this error message here will pop up and say one or more dirty areas were discovered, and the trace will appear to fail. So in order to trace through these errors anyway, there is an option that was added called Validate Consistency. So by default, this box is checked. But if you wanted to trace through these errors anyway, these are known errors within the NHD and NHD Plus high resolution data set when using Trace Network, you would have to uncheck that box and then those errors would be ignored. So once I uncheck that box, rerun the step, the trace is successful. You see it traced downstream from my starting point up here, and the data is now included. Again, this is by default checked on. So one of the first steps or one of the last steps before running the trace tool would be to uncheck that box if you know that you have a known error you're going to be tracing through. So as I mentioned, there are some more advanced options you can use when performing a trace. I'm not going to be showing you how to use those unless we have time and interest. Maybe at the end we can get into them a little bit more, but there are, again, a couple of these advanced options. So we have function barriers. A good use for function barrier might be if you want to restrict how far the trace can travel, you only want to know a set distance downstream or upstream, that's where you would set it here under condition barriers. Or if you want to know a maximum value that you would like to stop at if you were to hit, you could also set that here. Functions, it specifies whether a calculation will be applied to the trace results. This is useful in looking at things like minimum or maximum values of a specific attribute within the full trace network. We have output conditions, specifies the type of features that will be returned based on a network attribute, such as a name or type of attributes. These are combined. You can use multiple of these at the same time with and/or functions. And then result types by default, automatically you will get a selection in your feature classes. This is different than geometric network where you have to convert it into a selection. It's automatically a selection now. In ArcPro, you can decide to change this to an aggregated geometry if you would like to, and that would be done in this result type section. Some of these do need network attributes in order to use these. I know I did not show you how to set those up. If there's interest, we can go through that process if we have time at the end, but I did want to focus mostly on simple tracing. So I did also want to include a tip here if you are interested in some of these more advanced, more complex networks. In ArcPro 2.6 now, in the join field option, let's say you wanted to use a value-added attribute in our NHD Plus high resolution data set. That is, since that's a separate table, unfortunately for Trace Network, you do have to add that to your feature class, the NHD Flowline feature class ahead of time. And if anybody's interested in more what value-added attributes are, please let me know after the presentation. I can send you some information, some links on how to learn more about those. But since you do have to add them in ahead of time, something that I found useful when performing traces is this transfer fields option within the join fields. Normally, in order to add those in, you would have to join them, and to make them more permanent, you would have to export a new feature class. Now you can just choose to transfer whatever fields you would like. This example, I'm using the div to square kilometer, which is one of our VAAs. And instead of joining, you hit run, and it will just transfer that field based on an identifier. I just thought that was a helpful tip, and that can be used for more than just Trace Network, so I wanted to point that out here. Last thing I want to mention before we take any questions or revisit any of these topics is Esri did put out this blog post back on July 15th. It's very informative. It has a lot of good information and videos on how to use Trace Network within ArcGIS Pro 2.6. And I've linked it to this slide here. I can send out the link as well. It's very useful in going back and learning how to use the tool. So now I can take any questions if anybody has any related to performing simple tracing. We're trace network with the NHD.
Okay, Hayley?
Yes.
Yeah, there's several questions in the chat, so I'm going to kind of go through those and ask them. You can answer those. Some of them have been answered already in the chat. So let's see. The first question was about licensing, and see, Greg Cox answered that it's the network analyst license isn't required. You can use this under both standard and advanced ArcGIS Pro.
Yeah, so you do need actually a standard advanced license in order to use Trace Network.
So
you do
not
need
a, what was it? Is it ArcView, or that's an old term, I guess?
No, you shouldn't need any additional network analyst. If you have a standard advanced license, you'll have access to this toolbox.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. Another question that was asked was about setting the flow direction. Let's see. I don't think you showed that in your slide, but maybe you could show that if you have time to do a demo here a little bit.
Let's see. So my actually creating it was taking a long time, so that's why I didn't do a live demo, but I do have a session open with that data set that I was using. This is simply to use to, let me go ahead and input here. For line feature classes, I don't have much. I haven't used this very much, but from my knowledge of it, you can simply, it's mostly just flipping it. Like if you wanted to go with the digitized direction, if I were to put arrows on this, you would see the digitized direction is going this way. This tool is just meant to, if you want it to go this way, you can just flip it. I haven't used indeterminate direction, so I don't have much knowledge on that, but I have been able to flip it successfully. I don't have any examples of necessarily what I would use that for with the NHD. If anybody else does, feel free to share, but that's part of what they wanted to include, is the option to do that. So
yeah,
I don't know.
I think if you convert the existing geometric network, it will already be set, right? The flow direction will already be set to with digitized.
Yes, it automatically does with digitized. You don't have to set this as part of the process. It's only if maybe you see an error in how your flow is happening, which I have not observed with any of our products that I've tested so far, or if for some reason you do want to flip it, that's the only time you would use this. If you have a cause to, but it doesn't, it doesn't require this in order to build the trace network.
Okay, so another question that came up was about or actually it's just a comment that Greg Cox added that said that he wrote a script to remove the duplicate vertices, and that that can be done. I'll say that we're looking at this from sort of a programmatic standpoint, whether we can do this on the NHD itself, so that you don't have to mess with it. But if you are interested and you have an immediate need, then get with Greg, and he can provide you just informal, undocumented code, not something we're supporting.
And I will say Esri also has a script as well. It doesn't get rid of them for you, but it will find them for you. And I can find, and that's publicly accessible to everybody. It's on one of their informational pages. I can find that and link that as well. So if anybody's interested in having that, that's publicly released.
Okay, great. So another question came through, is asking about barriers. It says, do you have to manually apply each barrier, or can you apply them automatically based on an attribute of some sort?
So you should be able to, there was a way when we were testing this originally. So if you have a feature class, you can use this function, add selected, if you have like a point feature class already in your map. Again, I haven't had as much cause to play around with this as much as I would have liked yet. So I'm not sure. I don't think it has to be part of your trace network in order to work, but just be aware that it might. But I'm pretty confident that if like an NHG point feature class or something with wall like dams or any kind of walls, you should just be able to select them from your feature class and hit this and have them automatically be barriers. And the same with starting points as well.
So it's probably, and I haven't tried that particular thing, but it probably has to be something, a feature that's actually participating in the network. So the specific question was asked about dams. And so we don't have those features in the geometric network in the NHD, so they wouldn't automatically be participating in the network. But you should be able to do a spatial select to get those onto the flow line that they would be next to, and that way you'd be able to set up barriers that way. And there's a link in the chat that Greg Cox added to one of the, I think it's a blog post or help for ArcGIS Pro that will talk about that more. Next question is, do you know if Esri's made any progress in allowing the trace tool to be published through Portal or ArcGIS Online?
So I did ask them about that. I've been involved in testing the NHD on this, and they said that is a future enhancement. It's not currently released yet. So they are, from my knowledge, planning on that. That's just in a future release of this tool.
Yeah, not in 2.6.
No, potentially 2.7. That is what I remember hearing, but I would take that, I guess, with a grain of salt. It just depends on what happens.
Let's see, one more clarification about licensing. It's from Greg. Says it's not in the basic license level. So if you have ArcGIS with the ArcGIS Pro with a basic license, this wouldn't work.
Yeah, unfortunately, you do need a standard advanced license to use Trace Network.
Right. Okay. Let's see. Do you have advice if Pro doesn't allow you to add starting points? I think we've already answered that question. We think you can add them in pretty easily, unless I'm misunderstanding that question.
You should be able, if you're adding a mass amount of them, and for some reason this add select is not working, I guess my advice would be to try adding it to a trace network and then trying to do that. But unfortunately, if it doesn't work, they will, which it should, it will have to be manual. And that's a fairly simple process. But unfortunately, again, I haven't had as much opportunity yet to play around with that as I would have liked.
Okay, another question, indeterminate, that's, I think, related to flow direction, would be useful for canals or artificial paths, is the question. I can take that if you don't.
If you would like to. I don't think I'm understanding that.
Okay. Yeah, so you could use indeterminate on canals if you didn't want to route flow through those features. Often in the NHD, the direction of flow on canals isn't known. So yeah, that would be a good use of the indeterminate flow direction option in setting up your network. I wouldn't advise doing it on artificial paths. Artificial paths it's one of these, it's a name that we use for flow paths going through water bodies. And you definitely would want to trace, in most circumstances I can imagine, you would definitely want your traces to go through on artificial paths. Next question. Would this work on CONUS for all versions of NEC Plus? Hayley, you got some experience or some knowledge about running this on all of NEC Plus or all of CONUS NHD, right?
Yes. So the short answer is yes, it should work, but the difficulty there is so we've been able to run it once successfully on CONUS, but it does require a huge base of memory on your C drive or wherever you have ArcGIS Pro installed. Esri recommends for CONUS at least a minimum of 200 gigabytes of free space on the drive where your Arc Pro session is installed. That's a huge ask for someone generally to have. So we've only been able to do it once successfully at our testing events with Esri. And we haven't had the space available on machines we've tried to run it on to run it successfully in-house yet. So you can, I've been able to do it, and I've been able to successfully trace small sections of the network on it, but you do have to have that huge memory bank, and you also have to be patient with it. It takes a very long time to run. It took a couple days generally or it took about a day to build it and then a day to trace a small section of it. It didn't crash, it didn't fail, you just had to be patient. But the other good news is you can build it on large data sets. You can build it on statewide data sets. You do have to still have a little bit of memory bank, but nowhere near like 200 gigabytes. I was able to successfully build it and trace it on California, which is one of our largest state level data sets, in under an hour. So, and I was able to get most of California traced, for example. So while you can, I don't necessarily recommend it, building it on CONUS, but if you have the space to do so, feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, I would add to that that's one of the reasons why we have value-added attributes in NHD Plus, is that you can do, and we've got documentation on this, and we've put on a couple of webinars about this in the past, how to use those VAAs to do network traces. And the nice thing about those is they're simple database queries, so they work on any size database, whatever size package of the NHD Plus you have. So if you've got the CONUS wide NHD Plus, either version 2 or soon NHD Plus high res, which I should talk about in a minute, then it would be possible to use the value added attributes to do that. And it's probably going to perform better. Next question, can a flow line be clicked to make it a barrier?
As far as I know, no. The barriers have to be points. You can put it at the end of a flow line if you don't want to exclude that flow line, because in traces, it automatically, no matter where you put the point on it, it's going to include that whole flow line. So if you have a barrier, like let's say you wanted to put one here and trace it, it should not include that flow line. It should just be discontinued. That should be the stopping point for it, if that makes sense. But no, you can't use a whole flow line, unfortunately, as a barrier.
Okay, next in the chat is just a comment. Greg Cox added that he's using 2.7 beta and doesn't see an export to ArcGIS Online yet. So that's not to say that it may not make it into 2.7, but it's not in there in the current beta.
And if I'm right, Greg, I think 2.7 beta hasn't been released to the public yet. That's part of an early adopter community, so we might not be seeing it yet, as Al mentioned, but it might be. We'll keep an eye on it.
Mm-hmm. There's one question, and I don't know if we can get into debugging, but do you see the question there from Ellen about Pro won't allow her to start adding points at all, starting points, either manually or using a file. I suspect. No, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have a question or a suggestion there. I know when you built your trace network, were you able to enable it after you built it? I can show you what I mean, because it won't let you put on that starting version where the dirty areas around the whole map view, it won't let you put any starting points until after you use the enable network topology tool in the toolbox. So if you haven't done that, do that and then try it. If you have, I have not had that problem, but I can dig back into my notes to see if any of the other people that were testing this on the NHT have had that problem.
Yeah, and a suggestion from Danielle to check on projections. That might also cause problems. Like if you have multiple projections, the NHD is in geometric decimal degrees, right? So like if your other points that you were trying to match up were not in geographic, that could potentially cause this issue, I think. Let's see, Greg Cox noted in the chat that he ran national with 29 million full lines in 109 minutes, but he's got a whole lot of memory, 48 gigabytes. Actually, that's better than what we were expecting. Yeah.
That is better. If not, maybe Greg just has the magic touch with the national. But
yeah. Yeah, so it wouldn't run on a smaller virtual machine. Another thing that I've seen, but let's see, something that can really affect speed is whether you have a solid state drive or a hard drive for your installed disk. And like a lot of laptops I know are coming with solid state drives as their sort of C drive, right? And sometimes those will be really fast because a solid state drive is going to be a lot faster than a hard drive, and that can make quite a difference when you're doing something like this. Let's see. That's all of the questions. Hayley, were you going to do some live demo, or you sort of already done it?
I was using the slides mostly as a demo. My pro session, no matter how small of a data set I was choosing, was taking a long time to build this morning when I was running through it. I have this up here in case anybody mostly just had any questions or to show kind of what to look for. I can show you really quick, actually, what to look for in terms of the duplicate vertices. If you have that issue and have the interest in resolving it, even though there's a way around it, I don't necessarily recommend doing this. But if you're interested in finding them, the way I would suggest doing it, let's see if it'll cooperate with me today, is by selecting the area of issue here and editing the vertices. So as you can see, this is the next 1 and 2 are here. From this very close viewpoint, again, we're at 1 to 127. The next closest flow line is all the way over here. But if you were to continue zooming in, this is what the actual, not necessarily issue is, but this is what's being flagged at the duplicate vertices, are this 2 points here. So deleting one of these won't necessarily change the overall geometry of the flow line. If they're that close together, it's really high resolution. But I don't recommend doing this, mostly because this editing process, there can be multiple of these along one stretch of a flow line, a lot of different errors. They're not the easiest to find without zooming in super quickly or using a script, a Python script, or I believe is what Esri provided. And also, I would be careful about editing these as well, because there's a potential to introduce a gap, maybe imperceptible, between the end flow point of this one and this flow line here. And then that will also inhibit your trace. So while this is what they look like close up, I recommend using the validate consistency checkbox in the tool to just trace through them regardless. I don't recommend going in there and trying to fix this. It's a big, we're looking at it right now, ways we might be able to potentially resolve this, but I don't recommend a user, unless you have the time and interest to do so, take on doing this in your data sets.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to just uncheck that
Yep.
validation box and just go right
Validate
through those.
consistency.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's this validate consistency box. It's default checked. In order to trace through it, you would just uncheck it and then run the trace, and it'll trace through all of those. The only other error you might see that won't affect your trace is on islands. I don't think I have it in this data set, but it's where, see, maybe I can just, Al, are you cool with me drawing this in paint really quick? Are you all right with that? Just to show what it might
Yeah,
look like?
sure.
Okay. Very rudimentary, but I don't have an island, I don't think, in this hook. So the only other one that you might see is a self-intersecting flow line. And you're only going to see this in areas with islands. Excuse my really rough looking island that looks kind of like a hedgehog, but would be an island with no other flow. It's just the outline of the island. You shouldn't have any issues tracing with this in your data set, but you might also see that pop up as well when using trace network in your line error feature class. Just
Yeah,
this one
so
here.
it'd show up as a line error in a dirty area.
But it won't cause you any issues because odds are you're not tracing these anyway. So just be aware that could also be something you might see in an NHD or an HD plus high resolution data set.
Okay, any other questions for Hayley? I have one more thing, Hayley, if you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen again.
Absolutely. Stop sharing.
I just, I forgot at the very beginning to emphasize the big lead story on the newsletter this month is that we are finished with NHD Plus HR for beta for all of CONUS. I think we mentioned it on last month's advisory call. It actually happened the day that we had this call 3 weeks ago. That we finally got the last data set from the Great Lakes put in. So we have all of CONUS now in NHD Plus HR beta, all there. And plus we have Hawaii, Puerto Rico, the Pacific Island territories, and several units in Alaska done as well. So we do plan to do a data release this fall, sometime soon. Can't tell you exactly how soon, but probably within the next month or two. We plan to do a national data release of all of the NHD Plus HR. It's going to be all in one great big geodatabase, one file geodatabase. It will have everything that's current as of that date, as of right now. So everything you see in blue here will be in that data set. It will all be consistent, so we will make sure that all of the value-added attributes have been updated in upstream and downstream direction, so it's all consistent internally. And we plan to do these data releases periodically, roughly on a kind of annual basis, but we'll really be kind of looking at the data and what condition it's in before we do that. But we'll be making data releases of the whole national data set. So if you want to do work on the NHD Plus HR for like national projects, this will be the data set you really probably want to focus on. We're going to publish it. It will get a DOI, I forget what that stands for now, but it's a unique number that identifies that particular data set and version of the data set from now on and forevermore. Digital object identifier, I think is what that's called. So we will be doing this over the next couple months probably, and we'll have that data set available. So if you have a need for the national data set of NHD Plus HR all together, then that data set is coming soon. And I just wanted to let people know about that. And if you have a, I don't know if we'll be able to build the trace network on it. We may be able to. I won't promise that yet. But we might even be able to build that in to that data release. Let's see. That's all that I had today.